Welcome everybody. We're waiting for everybody to join us. There's quite a few of us joining today from all over the world. Why don't you use this opportunity to hop on the chat box and tell us where you're calling from today. I'm sure that we've got people from all over the globe. So do take time to let us know where you're calling from. You've come to CIPS Women Leaders in Procurement and Supply webinar series, and this topic is the one we've all been waiting for, Women Fellows of the World, and a topic on leadership and courage. Great, we've got Mike, welcome, Margaret, Nikki, fantastic. Excellent. People from all over the world, New Zealand, Namibia, South Africa, UK, Perth gets a shout out. Lots from Perth, Sydney. Keep telling us where you're from and keep engaging today on the chat function. So as mentioned, this is the CIPS Women Leaders in Procurement and Supply webinar series, and our topic is Women Fellows of the World, Leadership and Courage. And I'd like to advise you that this webinar is currently being recorded, and the best thing about it is it'll be available next week for you all to view again. So welcome to viewers from across the globe. Good morning, Europe. Good morning, UK, Middle East and Africa, and good afternoon, Australia, and good evening, New Zealand. In Australia, it is important to acknowledge the country we are on, and it's important to show respect for the traditional owners and the continuing connection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in our country. So today I would like to begin this session by acknowledging the Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation. They are the traditional custodians of the land on which I present from today, and we pay our respect to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples today. In fact, we extend that to everyone across the globe, your families and the people that you are connected to on the lands on which you dwell. And to our New Zealand neighbours, Tina Koko, Tina Koko, Tina Koko Katawa. Welcome everybody. We have over 180 registered attendees for this session today, CIPS Women Leaders in Procurement and Supply. And the topic, Women Fellows of the World. This one is going to be a ripper on leadership and courage. Before I begin, a little bit about CIPS. For those of you who don't know us, the Chartered Institute of Procurement Supply, well, we're the world's largest professional body serving procurement and supply. And we're dedicated to promoting good practice in procurement. We offer qualifications to help you achieve and excel in your career, and we help organisations excel in procurement and supply. We raise the awareness of the contribution that procurement and supply management can make to organisations and our community. And at CIPS, we like to showcase the best in procurement, and today's webinar is no exception. Today's webinar, we are going to feature outstanding global procurement and supply leaders, and we're really delighted to be showcasing leaders from around the world. We have this moment in time, and it's been made possible by the wonders of technology to have a conversation, and have a conversation with 5 CIPS Fellows from 5 countries. They're game changers, and they're making their mark in the world of procurement and supply. And during this time that we spend together today in conversation, we'll explore their differences, the similarities, but ultimately we'll use this opportunity to learn as they impart wisdom to help us all thrive. I'm delighted to be joined by the following fellows of our institute. Welcome to Gill Thorpe from the United Kingdom, Maryanne Karanja from Kenya, Sara Omar from United Arab Emirates, Billie Gorman from Australia, and Jo Toon from New Zealand. I welcome you to turn on your cameras. Welcome everyone. And please, everybody, join in the conversation by using the chat bar. You've all told us where you are. Keep the conversation going and make sure that you select everyone in that chat bar. And there'll be a great opportunity towards the end of today's session for questions and answers. So use the Q&A box and we'll get to your questions at the end of the session. So right, let's dive in, folks, and let's go to know our panelists a little bit better. Simon Sinek says that we are worth more than the work that we do. The work that we do is supposed to reflect who we are and not what our worth is. And too many of us define our lives by what we do for a living rather than accepting what we do for a living as just part of our overall purpose that guides our lives, or as Simon would call it, our why. To kick off today's session, rather than read out bios, I'd like to invite our panelists to share their why and their purpose. And it's only fair, I think, that if you're sharing your why, I should share mine. But in addition to that, we'd love to hear your why. If you could perhaps use the chat bar and tell us what your purpose is or what your why is. My why? Well, I've been on a lifelong journey driven by passion and purpose. And I started as a young child as a fundraiser for World Vision, as just in my young years. And then I went on to lead an organisation raising over $30 million for breast cancer research. But right up until the moment when the light bulb really went off, I had a light bulb moment. And what I learnt and understood in that moment was that by working collaboratively across public, private and not-for-profit sectors, we could actually make a huge difference to people, profit and planet. So for me, collaboration and bringing people together to solve societal problems is absolutely key. And this is why I'm here at CIPS in the ANZ region. The opportunity to serve a profession and a community of procurement and supply professionals to do the right thing in our purchases and our supply chain, making a difference. So my purpose in life is a simple one. It's to build connections to make a difference. And it's what brings me here today. It's what drives me to be involved in the procurement and supply community. It's what I do with my friendships and my family circles. I build connections between people, build networks to make a difference in the world we live in. So I'm excited to see some of yours coming up in the chat bar. So Sara, I'd love to turn to you now, and I'd love to know, what is your why or your purpose? What drives you?
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, everyone. And thank you, CIPS, for actually hosting us this morning and afternoon and evening time for everyone. And thank you for the participants and attendees. My name is Sara Omer, a fellow in Institute of Chartered Institute of Procurement Supply, CIPS, in Dubai. And it was interesting also to hear from you, Sharon, about your why. I believe a couple of things that you mentioned resonate with me, actually, with building connections and the networking. And this is one of the things that you find throughout your journey. When you start your career and you develop and you grow, you find the aspect of, developing the network, building the connections, linking the dots together, linking people to processes, linking people to organizations is what you strive for. I started early on as a young engineer when I graduated, and there was always this sense of curiosity and knowing the new and knowing exactly what is on the other side that drove me to supply chain. It was merely actually curiosity that I landed in a supply chain role. I just expressed my interest to learn and to open up into new domains, and I started from there. And then I really found my passion. I found that it's a function and it's a profession that helps you serve others and add value to others, add value to organizations or to employers or to the public. And it wasn't, as everyone knows, it was more of a back-end support function. But then when it started to evolve, and I feel people with the passion through the years that had put forward procurement and supply chain in the front, and I would be proud to say maybe I was one of those people in my region that actually helped to shed the light on this profession. And this what drives me. This what drives me in everything that I do, that I try to excel and I try to shed the light on it, and I try to bring attention to it as a cause, as an activity, and also to motivate and to inspire younger generations and younger people who follow our steps and see what we're doing. So my why, if I look at it in the last 4 or 5 years, is more around raising the flag of the profession, of actually being a good example for younger generations, and also from a job or a role perspective is also enabling organizations and procurement with the newest technologies out there, because I'm an advocate and I'm very much enthusiastic about the new and the technology and all the breakthroughs and innovations. So just in summary, my drive is more around shedding the light and bringing attention to what I'm doing and exposing it in a good way, and making it positively reflected, be it procurement, be it technology, be it women networking and women support, and also motivating and energizing the younger generations and people who reach out for support and help and advice. I'm always open there for advice and help to everyone. So thank you for hosting me this morning, Sharon and Sophia, and the rest of the fellow ladies. I pass it, I think, back to you, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you. Showing the light and leading by example. I love that, Sara. Thank you. Jo, we're going to head over to New Zealand now. What about you? What drives you?
Oh, well, kia ora koutou, and absolutely lovely to be online and to be speaking to so many people from so many different countries around the world. Slightly overwhelming and very exciting. So I think it's almost following on very much from yours, Sara, with you talk about shedding the light, and my why I worked out a while ago was find the fire. So I get really enthusiastic and passionate about what I do. I love procurement. I love the difference that we can make, and particularly in social services procurement, which is my current role, knowing the difference that we make for our children and young people on a daily basis. And what I love to be able to do is share that with people and get them excited and enthusiastic. And what that means in terms of that influence and motivation is finding their why. So why should they come to the procurement team? Why should they follow a process, follow it's rather than just doing X, Y, Z. So being able to link in with them and explain what we do, why what we do is so important, and then see them get it. And similarly, it's sharing ideas, linking with people, making connections, and also very similar, Sara, is that your curiosity. I love learning, and I get to learn every single day in this job, and just I feel so privileged to be able to do that. So yeah, it's finding the fire for me, for other people, and yeah, growing and developing and supporting our children. That's me.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Jo. Maryanne, tell us your story.
I think mine is similar to Jo's and Sara's, and in so many ways, I think regardless where you draw your wisdom from. So for me, as a Christian, because I draw my purpose from the Bible, and I like to say this often, when I read it through the lenses of what that means for me in terms of application. My favorite one is to go forth and be fruitful and multiply. So therefore, I believe I have the responsibility to improve situations I find myself in, and to seek to be a better version of myself each day, and therefore improve the world that I live in, make a positive impact, to serve and lift others in the process, because that's what I feel strongly is my mandate. So having said that, I think that because I started out in finance, I studied finance in university, and when I went in, I realized, I thought the biggest space for me to make an impact, to be fruitful, to do more was actually in procurement and supply. So I love the fact that I've been in procurement for over 20 years. And in all these years, I've had the opportunity to add value, to work with others, to be able to help them grow to where I am and beyond, and also to learn from them continuously, because there's diversity in the people that I get to work with, not just within the organizations, but if you look at the external stakeholders in terms of your suppliers, government, other institutions, etc., then it's a very, very big platform for me to be able to learn, grow, do more, do better, improve not just the organization, but also the planet in terms of my delivery. So I'd summarize by saying that's really my why, that I need to improve as I deliver. And procurement gives me the opportunity to do that. Back to you.
As well as lifting others. Thank you, Maryanne. I'm just going to take a sneaky peek here and read some of the whys that are coming up, and some beautiful whys. I've got one here. Why is to help my country, Sudan, after the greatest revolution in 2018. The past regime was full of corruption, false policies, poverty, racism, capitalism. And through the CIPS best practices and skill of read between the lines of whatever over evaluation. Thank you for sharing that. My why is uplifting women-owned business participation in mainstream economy. Thank you, Rosemary, for that. Gill, we might move to you and for you to tell us your why.
Do you know, it's really fantastic, isn't it, listening to women speak, because women always want to help women. I mean, I know so many fabulous women in my network, and I get a really great feeling when everyone talks about what they can do to support others, and it is about bringing others along with you. So my why, I think what makes me tick really is just having a strong belief in something, a sense of being part of a collective change, and really giving that 100%. For me, that's got to be around people and planet. There's so much to be done, and how that translates in a day-to-day basis within my work is having a really clear vision, an aim, and finding ways of doing things better solutions, more sustainable solutions, driving ethical practices, and not just talking about it. It's actually finding pragmatic ways and viable ways to make change happen. And as we all know, that's not easy. It takes time, but it's trying to do that within my own company, down the supply chain, and for my customers. But it's also about being an active member of something, as we've all talked about being part of CIPS. I was part of council. I was part of council from 2009, and I've been part of the CIPS Fellows committee since 2011. And I joined, that's with Shirley Cooper, and I joined Tina Fugent on the Special Knowledge Group for Marketing, Procurement back in, I think, 2018. So it's a lot to do with being part of your organisation, to support and to give back. And other membership bodies that I've been involved with, which is around sharing awareness, around making sure that you're taking people with you on that journey. And I think for me, it's increasing awareness, because so many people do not understand the challenges of human rights. So many people don't really understand a lot of the issues around climate change and around environmental aspects. So the more we can share, the more we can drive better behaviours and good practices, and any small changes make such a big difference. So my why, what gets me up in the morning, is being in a really privileged place where I can talk to lots of people. I've got a fabulous network that I can support and help to make a small difference in how we do things, because procurement basically is the power in driving that change. We're in control of supply chains, and that is such a huge opportunity for doing good. So that's what gets me up in the morning.
I love that. And your reference to being part of something bigger is so important as well. You can't do this alone. You've got to be with everybody else as well.
Absolutely.
Billie, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. What drives you? What gets you up in the morning, Billie?
I'll try not to be too controversial, but I will be really honest with everybody. And interestingly, Sharon, I've got a one-way ticket to London the day I got my degree. I thought, well, if I failed, I'm going to go and have a great year and come back and repeat. Luckily, I didn't fail, but I landed in London with no knowledge, $2,000 in my bank account, and a desire to go and work for Oxfam and become a development aid advisor for the Australian government eventually. And that was my career pursuit. Found out that there weren't any jobs for journalists in London that could pay me a decent amount to survive on. So I ended up still doing my volunteering work at Oxfam, but took a job as a temp, as a project manager, and then saw these people over in this procurement team that seemed like they were having a lot of fun, and it was paying about £5,000 more a year. So my why was to go and join the procurement team. So Sarah can have that. So I chose procurement because it paid more. And my why for a long time was really about lifestyle. I want to earn as much money as I can to have a lifestyle that I aspired to having. And to be honest, in my 20s and 30s, I had children. My why was a lot about that. And luckily, now that I'm a bit past that, I can now do what I like. I can reflect on the fact that I constantly said to my husband that I loved what I did. So whilst I chose, I want this kind of lifestyle as my why for getting up and going to work, I was fortunate enough to find a career and pursue that career very early. I think I was 6 months into working in this procurement team before I started embarking on my MCIPS certification. So I was very quick to go. I've found that this is what I want to do. And I really can say that now that I'm a little bit older, a little bit wiser, it's around the fact that, and all of the ladies here have shared around the ability to make a difference. Procurement has constantly fed my need for satisfying my level of curiosity and my connection with people. So they're the two things that I think I prioritize in my life, is constantly learning about all sorts of, my husband would say, crazy stuff that's not really relevant to the day-to-day life that we live, but it's curious anyway, and also connection with people. And we've been reflecting in Rio about what our procurement why is. And I think, the ability to help businesses grow, the ability to help people grow, whether that's, your inclusive procurement strategy, the growth in that space, we can definitely take these things and make them happen for an organization. And the other thing that I would say is around, innovation and problem solving. Those things are things that procurement can. And even if we don't have the answers, we're in a really fortunate place to bring those people together. So my why now is definitely around people growth, making them better, hopefully, and business growth in whatever, area we need to pursue that in strategically. So that's really my why. And soon my why will be, to lay on a beach, hopefully, for, the foreseeable.
I love that. But continue to love what you're doing, because that sounds like that's what gets you up in the morning. Thanks, Billie. And I'm just going to read one of our comments. Alison, her why is to see the world change from me to us in every country, every continent, and across nations, especially strengthening young women to me more than what society's images from years back, women with aprons and children's on the hip, to educated, strong, confident women who can be more than just a wife or a mother, but doing so lovingly. I grew up with the saying, a community raises our children. So every children, young girl, lady or woman is my passion. I am the community. Thanks, Alison. That's beautiful. Billie provided a nice little segue then to referencing one of our colleagues, Sarah Collins. So as I move into part one, Journey to Procurement, I'd like to tell you that Sara Collins, a fellow based here in Australia, reminds many of our procurement professionals to not say that you fell into procurement, but instead elevate the conversation and say that procurement found you. Sara is so deeply passionate by this that she started the movement under the hashtag Procurement Found Me. So in this frame of thought, tell me, Maryanne, what was your journey into procurement?
Sharon, I'm actually just thinking about your question, and what comes to mind is that we ran towards one another, if that is if that is something I can say. But my journey into procurement is really a culmination of a series of asks. I think as I started out, when we were talking about my why, I indicated that I had studied finance in uni. I studied banking and finance at Kenyatta University. I also studied CPAs to conclusion, so I was actually a chartered accountant. And when I went to Unilever, I joined as a management trainee. And after completing my management traineeship, I settled into finance department. But having stayed in finance for about a year, I realized that I was more suited to be in the action, in the operations, to speak more directly to the customer needs and wants. And quite frankly, I'd resonate with Billie, where she says, you know, people in logistics, because that's what it was referred to then where I was, seem to have more fun than those of us who are in finance looking at things historically, say, okay, so what happened? So what I did is that I had a meeting with myself and I said, I think I should move to another department. And I walked into my finance director's office and I said, look, I'd really want to change my role. And then he asked me what role I wanted. And I indicated to him, I think I'd like to move to logistics. And then he only just had one ask. He said, look, if you can find someone who's willing to swap with you, you can move into the function. And I literally walked out of his office, went into the logistics floor, and I said, excuse me, everybody, is there anyone who'd be willing to swap with me, to swap their role in finance, in logistics for a finance role? And one lady stood up. I really thank her, Mira, because she said, look, I've been in logistics for some time. I'm happy to make that swap. And then I walked back downstairs in another 25 minutes and said, look, here, I found somebody and that we could swap with. And that is how I ended up in the function or in the department. So I'd say my journey into procurement was a bit of reflection where I was and what I wanted to do. And I thought it was very attractive. And therefore I went to ask for it. And I think maybe fate and the universe coincided to just create the opportunity for me. So logistics or procurement and I found one another on that day. But it's been a very good journey. I've learned, I've grown, I've done almost every aspect of procurement and supply, category, contract management, sustainability, women in business, managing teams, working cross-culturally, diverse teams, cross-continent. So it's been a great ride, and that's how I landed in procurement. So I'd say to anyone who's really not sure or thinking about it and not sure where to start, just ask.
Beautiful, thank you, Maryanne. And Jo, tell us your journey to procurement.
So mine's an interesting pathway. So my true career pathway started in IT sales. So in the UK for a small geographical information system firm, and I was one of the people in the back office that was responding to all the RFPs, RFQs, RFTs, ROIs, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, the flip side of the procurement thing, but I'd never realized that procurement was actually a career. You know, we were dealing with the business owners quite often in what we were doing. So I had all the paperwork, but didn't really consider what was happening in the background. Then moved over to, my husband and I emigrated to New Zealand about 12 years ago. And I couldn't get a job in sales. Couldn't get a job in IT, and was very, very fortunate in that a hiring manager at the Ministry of Education needed somebody in IT contracts administration. And I was running my first tender about a month or so later and never looked back. So yeah, it definitely found me, because I hadn't realized it existed. To us, even the job title wasn't procurement at that point, but loved it. And I've now covered IT, social services, corporate, a large range, not everything, but a large range, and social services then my passion. So that's me.
Wonderful. Thank you. Glad it found you. Thanks, Jo. And Gill, how did procurement find you?
Oh, goodness. Do you know, I'm going to just tell a quick story. So CIPS asked me to go to a college to talk to a school to talk to students about procurement, and I got there and the army were there and the Air Force were there and all these exciting careers were there, and I was there to talk about procurement, and guys came up to me. I didn't have a big queue. The guys came up to me and said, what do you do? And I said, I shop for a living. And suddenly everyone started talking to me, and I was talking about the things that we source and all the different aspects of it. So it's just such an exciting space to be. And it's lovely when you talk about it to people who really think, what is procurement? But my journey, I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do as a career. And I think, you know, sometimes you follow different paths when you're younger and hope that you're going to find a direction that's going to be right for you. A sort of a journey of discovery, I think. And then hopefully when you find something that it clicks, and for me it did. So I started out in a marketing agency. I was working for lots of really big brands, soft drinks brands, snack brands. And it was a great environment. It was creative, it was entrepreneurial, but also fun, but with all the discipline and the professionalism that needed to go with it, because we were dealing with really massive campaigns. And then our procurement team procurement found me, because the team came to me and said, could I help with an urgent project, short-term project that just needed some support? And they felt I had the right skills to do the job right. So I think actually it was because nobody else said yes. So I took on a project, which I won't lie, it was tough. It was really tough, and I can see why I was given that project from the team. But it was an amazing learning experience. And at the end of it, my boss asked me if I would like to continue that role within the procurement team for a specific account group, which I said yes. And but only if I could learn to do what I was supposed to be doing. So I found CIPS. And they funded my CIPS training while I was working in the agency, and it was amazing. It really supported all the different things that we needed to bring to the agency. So we set up some really great systems, processes, great understanding across the team, and it really helped my career within the organisation. But then I got asked to join another organisation to set up systems and processes in there, and to bring in that discipline, which I did. And then ultimately, I set up the sourcing division of that business, which was good fun. But again, a lot of learning. And I don't know, I can't remember who said it, but there's just something to learn every single day. And, you know, the what ifs, what if this happens? I mean, we've known over the last 18 months, there's always another what if that we've never thought of. So yeah, so my journey was a bit of a strange one, and that led me to then set up my own sourcing company 26 years ago. And that brought new learning around working with factories. What does a good factory look like? And I did see some really bad factories, and that sets you off on another journey. So procurement is such an exciting place to be, because there are so many aspects to it, you know. And so, yeah, it found me, and I'm glad it did.
And so are we. Thank you, Gill. Now, we might just move quickly to part 2 of the session today, which is all around leadership. And how often have we heard that procurement should have a seat at the table? Well, Sheryl Sandberg says, don't expect you'll get to the corner office by sitting on the sideline. You need to lean in. So in this context, and based on your leadership experience today, Billie, how do you take a seat at the table? Tell us.
Oh, well, you just pull up a chair, Sharon. It's as easy as that. Look, I think practically there's just hard work and getting the job done. You know, those fundamental things that it doesn't matter what gender you are. You know, it's hard to get taken seriously if you're not prepared to bring the best of whatever you've got to the conversation. So credibility and being prepared, you know, knowing your subject, doing your homework are keys to actually having the level of conversation that you need to have with your stakeholders in order for them to see value in you and treat you as a trusted partner. So that's the practicality side of it. There were some really interesting things when I was young that people would coach me on, and I'd attend women in business forums like this, and fitting in seemed to be a theme of the day. And I don't know whether that's going to resonate with anyone on the panel or anyone on the call, but certainly, you know, I got given a handbook of 5 things not to do. Don't wear dangly earrings, for example. Don't wear your hair out. Don't wear too much makeup. You know, fit in with the people. Wear suits. Oh, yes, Sharon, you're in the corner, in the back seat. But but there were things that I was told that, I'm talking about, late 90s, early 2000s, that I did. I have no idea whether that made a difference, but I certainly wasn't controversial. But I've met heaps of controversial people that are absolutely celebrated for their uniqueness. So I don't think that in today's date, where we bring our truly human self to work, that those rules apply. But certainly as I was coming up as a youngster, and I also looked very young, but I used that to my own advantage as well, because people didn't expect me to be as on top of my conversation and my profession as I was. So I could, unarm suppliers, for example, by, structuring the negotiations to get a better outcome than the stakeholder ever thought was possible. So, there were things like that. I've always been strategically minded. So, if someone came and said, oh, you need to sort our travel problem out, next thing we had a complete, digital travel booking system that no one even thought was possible because they just wanted a travel deal. This was, 25 years ago. So I've always been quite strategically minded, so always challenging the ask and raising the level of the conversation to make sure that, the people around the conversation think that I've got something of value to contribute. So I think there's the hard work, the nuts and bolts, that you have to do your homework, be prepared, know your topic, come ready for the conversation, be willing to work hard. But then there's the other things about, knowing your audience and having some, emotional intelligence around who are your, are you dealing with accountants who want all the numbers, or are you dealing with marketing people who are more visual? So making sure that you can make a connection with your stakeholders as well. And that gets you a seat at the table. The other is, clearly I've laid my cards on the table. I was ambitious, so I was willing to work the hours and do the hard work. I wanted a seat at the table. And personally, I married someone who would truly partner with me. So I was allowed to travel. When I say allowed, it meant, if you're not in a partnership where your partner says, it's okay, I'm good for a week with the kids, you go do what you need to do, then you're limited sometimes in some of that. Now, hopefully COVID is going to teach us that you don't have to be in the room to have effective conversations. But at the time, having someone that could top and tail the day, share the parental responsibilities and the household responsibilities, certainly enabled me to take more responsibility at work than I may have been able to have if I had a full-time job at work and a full-time job being a parent and a home carer. So that's just some of the things that I navigated my way to the table. But then you fight to stay there. Can I just say, you start a new job and you start all over again. It's not like you got handed the baton and it continues through forever. You come into and you bring all of those skills into the next organisation to fight your way back to the table again.
Thank you. Sarah, I'm sure.
Sharon, I was just going to say, when Billie said that you need to look at the series or the nature of the stakeholders that you have so as to be able to engage them rightfully, I reflected on a question someone asked me. I think a young procurement person said, is it one table? Is it a series of tables? I mean, is it a wide table? What is this table? So, and to your point, Billie, I think it's really about the stakeholders that we engage and how we connect with them, because you have lots of opportunities and it's where you sit and meet and add value to the conversations. Yeah. Thanks. That actually just reminded me of that conversation.
Love it. Sara, I'm really interested on your perspective, working and living in Dubai, around that seat at the table.
Thank you, Sharon, for that, actually. I believe in Dubai, in UAE, and in the Middle East, it would be the same challenges that people face around the world, where they want to be heard and part of the table, as Billie and Maryanne were talking about, and actually adding value. To me, being part of the table and being part of the team that makes things happen, it all stems from you as an individual, from the passion that you have about what you're doing. And this is the first thing, being a young professional, being a new entrant, or being someone in their mid-career stage or leadership stage, is always the drive and the passion that you have and the belief in what you're doing would then make people listen to you, and would make decision makers, chief executives, business leaders, organization leaders really consider to have you in that table, having you in those 2 tables or 3 tables, as Maryanne was saying, because everyone wants to have around them people who add value, people who bring in positivity to the function, to the job, to the cause. And that positivity comes from you as an individual first. If you believe in what you're doing, if you have the nature to excel and to take it forward, and if you at some point of your life feel that you're not in the right place, you're not doing the job that you can excel in or you love, I think we should be then, one should be true to themselves and really have a stand and maybe shift and change and diversify into somewhere new. Because no matter what you do, as long as it is something that you are truly passionate and believing in, this is where you will always guarantee that seat in the table. You will always guarantee being heard and being listened and affecting change and adding value. In Dubai and in Middle East, there was an old perception in the past about role of women and women being in limited capacities in Middle Eastern cultures. But this has been changed a lot, in the last 2 decades or so. And women are now taking more of that front-end leadership roles in the difficult arenas, in difficult operations. And one of the good things that I cite about my employer currently is that when a new technology provider, a French company, wanted to start in the region from scratch, their first hire as a business leader and as a sales business leader in the Middle East was actually a woman. So that was at the beginning of my career in this domain of technology, sales and business expansion. In early stages, I was always being asked, is it right to have a woman in that role to sell technology in Middle East? So me and my counterparts and other ladies in the field, had to prove ourselves time and again that yes, it's not about the region, it's actually about us and about our integrity and about people believing what we provide. I believe even women in sales roles, to my belief, they excel more than their male counterparts in many aspects, and I'm not going to go there. So yes, you can have a seat in the table as long as you are passionate about what you're doing and believing in it. That people will listen to you. If you're not in the right place, you need to be true and honest to yourself and maybe really shift and change the game. And being a woman in the Middle East is no longer a barrier to do anything. And as I said, I'm just a very small, simple example of European companies and businesses that are entering the market, actually taking women in on board to lead their business and sales. So yes.
Thank you. That's great to hear. Wonderful news. Gill, in that frame of leadership and moving sort of from the seat of the table, talk us through some of the lessons that you've learnt that you'd love to share with us and our audience.
Well, I think it's got to start with having a clear vision. And as we all know now, a very well-considered plan B and possibly C. But also not being afraid to adapt and change as you go, because things change, things are constantly changing. And I think at the moment, we've never seen such change. So, embrace that. Be happy to go for innovation and be true to your values. So I think from a procurement perspective, being a forward-thinking leader, not being afraid to try something different, being very open to bring in ideas and to bring in connections that can help you drive some really exciting change within the organisation. There's some amazing technologies out there, as we all know, but you've got to engage also across the organisation. And I think one of the most powerful pieces is where someone in procurement is really well networked internally. And you have to make the time to do that. Make a really good internal network, collaborate across different teams within an organisation, whether that's HR, whether that's sustainability, whatever area, logistics, engage with them. So because that way you can bring a lot more to the organisation. you know, be receptive to new thinking. As I say, don't be afraid to change tack if you have to. But yes, so I think the other thing is, if you have a message, so for example, from a D&I perspective, sometimes that message doesn't get across. So it doesn't matter if it's D&I, whatever it is, sometimes that message doesn't really relate and engage internally. And so you have to adapt that message. You have to create some storytelling so that you can take people with you on the journey that you're on within your part of procurement, because you have to take them with you. They have to understand what it is you're trying to achieve, and they have to care about it as well. So I think don't be afraid to change your messaging. Don't be afraid to think differently about how to communicate with different connections within an organisation in order to get the outcomes that you need to get. And listen to people and take on, you know, those ideas, and make sure your team stand out for what they bring to the party. So I think those are some thoughts, and I think, you know, it's an incredible space to be. It's an incredibly difficult space to be in at the moment, as we probably all know. But just keep strong, just keep going with the times, be clear on where you want to be, and take people with you and support them all the way through. And I think that would be just a few thoughts from me.
Yeah, so link with that, Jill, that you know, you think about what our role is, and you're connecting it back to that seat at the table. Sometimes it doesn't matter if you're not actually at the table, as long as you're influencing and working with the people who are. We can't be in the room for every single decision. It's just not enough time. So how do we, as leaders, work with the people who are there? And that, for me, has always been sort of that biggest thing for my leadership, is it's not about the title. It's about how you connect. So linking with what you were saying there, and how you're engaging with people. And also not being afraid, particularly when you're in that innovation space, not being afraid to say, I don't know, should we find out together? There's a difference between saying I don't know from a technical procurement perspective, but when you're trying something new, and we're doing it in our the social services space in New Zealand, and particularly within Oranga Tamariki, we're pushing a lot of new boundaries at the moment. So to say we're going to try something, this is what the risks are, this is what we think it's going to potentially come out as. Why don't we give it a go? Because what we've done before hasn't worked. Let's try. The other thing, sort of more of a wider leadership, is having somebody good to talk to. Use your networks and your connections, because leadership is lonely. People don't tell you that right at the start, but it is lonely when you're the one that's having to make some of those ultimate decisions and those ultimate calls. So get yourself a mentor, a friend, a colleague, somebody else who's got that leadership experience. And with our global community, it doesn't have to be somebody in the same building. We've got, just see here on the call how many people we've got from around the world. We've got people to reach out to. And so that, and while you're trying something new, somebody else might have done something similar as well. So that's some of my thinking from that leadership space.
Thank you, Jo. I'm just going to read, Karina has written something lovely here. Someone wise once said to me, good things never come from comfort zones. If we want success, we must get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Maryanne, what's your leadership tips?
I think what I can only add to what my colleagues have said is trust. It's easier said than done, and I keep saying that. Because we need to create an environment of trust, where you can trust your team first to execute their mandate, and that they can trust you that you have their back, and that when they make mistakes, first that you'll give them the room to make mistakes, and then you will journey together towards, you know, the lessons learned in delivery. One of the lessons I found makes it easy for me to do that is first, as someone who's reporting into somebody who's senior, the first conversations we have with them is around who you are. It's not what title you have, what mandate you've been given by the organization. And I tried this with my former boss, because when he came in, he said, I'm so-and-so, I have X number of years of experience in what I'm doing, and I've come from this organization, and this is what I'm going to deliver. And I said, okay, so do you have family? Do you have children? What drives you? How do we create an environment where you can still go home to your kids and your family? What's really important for you? And I can also do my bit, because this is also what's really important for me. So whenever we have conversations, and let's have conversations with that in mind, that's one. And I've also tried to do that in the new organization I've joined, because I've just been there a month old. And in the initial conversations I had with everybody, because I've got like 50 people in my department, I said, so any of you playing soccer, supporting a football team? I support Liverpool. I'm not saying this for the audience, but if you're with Liverpool, you're with me. But it's just to say, can we have conversations about humanity? And because that is what brings us to the office. And then secondly, and what happened out of that is that a number of them actually phoned me separately, or the WhatsApp me and said, hey, that was really interesting. It was different. So I said, look, if you ever need to have a conversation, my role is to clear the pathway for you to succeed. So that's why we need to continuously encourage people to engage. Secondly, is because it is so difficult for you as a leader to know when you're making mistakes, is if you can identify a person who can give you this feedback from within the team. You came across as bullish. You know, I don't think you really understood the context very well, but the team is really struggling with X. So that's a feedback you will need to get from your team, but you need to create an environment of trust, or identify this person who's so courageous, who's happy to have this conversation with you, so that from time to time, then they can give you that feedback, because you need to grow as you're also, you know, taking care of your team and growing them. Yeah.
Thanks,
That's what
Maryanne.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I recently heard someone speak on the fact that, you know, as leaders, you know, we're really about leading and managing people, and it's really about anything. The people that we manage, what do they need to do their job better? It's about always serving others, really, isn't it? How can we support and serve others? Thank you. Such generous responses. Thank you. We're going to move to the next part, which is future-proofing procurement. But before I do that, we've got a wealth of knowledge and wisdom in this panel. I want people to start putting some questions into the Q&A box, because we are going to make time to be able to answer some questions. So let's move on to the next section. And I really want us to start looking at the people that we've got in the room, and they're all fellows of the Institute. They've all been recognised for their passion, their drive, and their determination to advance this profession. And they've also demonstrated an outstanding level of achievement, knowledge and experience in the procurement supply profession, as you've all heard, and they've all been quite pivotal in raising the profile, the public profile of the profession. So under this lens, and thinking about, in particular, our panellists' experience, you know, the knowledge that you've accumulated, the experience you've accumulated over the journey, let's turn our attention towards strategic leadership and thinking about the future in the profession. So, Sara, I'm particularly interested in starting with you. And how do you influence or perhaps elevate procurement in the decision-making process, particularly around that C-suite level? You know, what's your strategic priority as a leader?
Thank you, Sharon. Actually, my role, as you're aware, is more of the provider to procurement sort of a role. So I see procurement from the other side of the table, where procurement is trying to, you know, build their agenda, provide the business case, and provide the right convincing and right business sound context to their C-suite and to the chief executives to actually get the organization to recognize the profession more and recognize the function and invest in technology or capacity building or skill building. So I see it from that side, and I see that for the CPO and for procurement functions and procurement roles to actually influence and make it and how they can improve the future of what they're doing is actually by being really aware of the context of what they're doing and the environment of where they're operating. So really being aware of the business goals and the strategies of the organizations that they are serving, and where it needs to be in the next 5 to 10 years, and what are the growth plans, and then being part of that, and looking at themselves as more of the business leaders and risk mitigation sort of functions that would be helping the organization to grow. It's not about just fulfilling that procurement plan. It's not about really fitting within the budget. It's not about just making sure that we're buying it at the right time, at the right place, with the right price. It's more of really elevating the level of what procurement is doing within the organization and what procurement can do. And this is where we can deliver value. And I see it from the other side as a provider in many cases where either some functions and some procurement organizations succeed in that and some do not succeed. And the difference is in the fact that those who succeed are the ones who have the right conversation within other functions and within the leadership and chief executive and C-suite level on what value add they can bring and how they can translate the organization strategy to what procurement can do. On the other side is where people who are still revolving around the tactical, more of medium level of what procurement impact is, they do not much succeed in actually selling their business case to C-suite and making sure that procurement does have the right tools and investment in place to grow as a function and help the organization grow. Not sure if I managed to answer that in a clear way, but to me, I saw it from both sides. I saw those who succeeded and those who did not succeed. And the difference is that those who didn't succeed are still within the realm of the old, old type of procurement and old guard of procurement, where we're still looking at what we can achieve year by year, just without, savings and so on and so forth, not looking at it from a bigger picture, risk mitigation sort of function. And yeah, this is my view as a supplier, if I may.
No, perfect. Great to see that perspective. And Jo, what about from your perspective around that priority?
Yes, so coming from the government sector as opposed to the commercial sector, it's very interesting listening to what you're talking about, and the being aware of the context, which is, again, I think is just so important. And for me, it's also who's involved in those decision makings and thought processes. So from a public sector, you've got people in policy, you've got the project teams that are writing business cases, as well as your deputy chief executives, your senior leaders. So it's how you have the right conversations with the right people at the right time. Being very lucky at the moment to actually be in on some of those earlier conversations. And it's being to really have that why, so that elevator pitch, and having that ready for every time you have that conversation, every time you're going to something new. You don't want to sit and spout, well, these are the rules, these are the regulations, this is the must do's. It's actually what's the why for that person, and whether that is at an operational tactical side, because some of those the people we're working with think at that operational tactical level, or whether it's that full strategic. It's being able to have it pitched to the right level for your audience, knowing your context. That's really where I come in with that. How do we get procurement in earlier, as right people, right place, right time?
The magic question. Thank you.
Can I just add, Sharon, something that I like to say to people as well, is if you're just joining the dots in procurement, if that's what you think your job is, then you'll never ever be able to influence the C-level audience. So when you've got your procurement hat on, how are you a business enabler? How are you enabling the business to get what they need? They might want to cut corners and everything like that, but fundamentally what you need to do is help support their outcome. And that's really how you think respect is kind of listening to your audience and being a business enabler instead of just a box ticker process rule follower.
Terrific, thank you. The question that we're getting asked a lot with our crystal balls at the moment is, where do we see procurement and supply in the next 5 to 10 years? I'm interested to hear all of your viewpoints, and I might just get you just to make a few brief comments or key points, and particularly starting with you, Maryanne. And, you know, what is the future of procurement and supply? What's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years? If you've got a top 2 for us.
I think when I reflect on that, I always ask myself, isn't the future already here? It's a good place to start, because I say one is with COVID, what we've seen is that it's just brought to the fore the significance of the supply chain and procurement function in general. And I know most of us are still trying to deal with the shortages and issues and risks associated with that. But then therein lies the opportunity in terms of just saying, look, this is where I add value. This is how I can help. This is how I can de-risk the entire sourcing process. And this is now. Now, if we layer technology on top of that, because there's a lot more going on in the technology world with robotic process automation, with artificial intelligence, with machine learning, with blockchain, etc., then you can see that then there is a very, very big opportunity for procurement folks to understand technology. And that goes into then how we drive our negotiations, not just in the technology space, but how to harness that technology for data-driven decision-making. And the reflection then that affords us to say, look, where are we going to deploy this technology? What does it mean for my organization? And how will it get me to deliver value faster, better, in a more sustainable way? I'll also say, if you can allow me to just speak for Africa at this time, because there are conversations I've been having in the background with my little group of similar-minded folks around what does this mean for Africa? What are governments doing around this? I'll say is that whereas generally we say Africa lags, I would say government is actually doing a lot of stuff to lead that journey towards being technologically ready, to use say robotic process automation, to use blockchain specifically, because I can see there's a lot of legislation in South Africa, in Kenya, in Uganda, in Ethiopia, I've seen that, in Nigeria, around then how do we ensure that there is a clear space and a platform for the private sector and also the government to come and operate and use that technology to improve livelihoods. What does that mean for procurement? And this is where I say, if you're thinking about the future and where we will be, it means that because we are the experts in what we do, and we should be the experts in how to harness that technology to deliver good outcomes, is that we have a very, very big opportunity through industry associations, through engagements with government. In Kenya, we refer to them as parastatals, or quasi-government institutes, to say, beyond legislation, what should we be doing? How do we start this journey in terms of harnessing technology? What are the benefits? And if you're looking for tech companies to come and do a demo or do a pilot, then you invite them into the same conversations, because then only then can you fast track that journey going forward. What that means for us, therefore, is one, we already have the table, because I know we're talking about earning your seat at the table. We have this very big table. So let's go and start these conversations. That's one. In the private space, then I'll also think is because of the criticality of the procurement function and the ability to connect from business needs, sourcing, all the way to delivery to the customer, is that if we play this right, then we will increasingly see many more CEOs. So it's not just C-suite, it's not just chief of function, but you have the opportunity to become the CEO of all these organizations and drive the conversations in the right way. That's how I see it. Back to you.
Thank you. And an important part, technology, digitization. Absolutely well said. Thanks, Maryanne. Gill, I'm really interested to bring you into the conversation now, because with your lens around sustainability and supplier diversity and the like, I'm interested to hear your perspective on the future of procurement.
Yeah, sure. I think I look at procurement, and someone mentioned old school, and there is still a lot of old school procurement out there, but there's a lot of new thinking in procurement, and the power down the chain in terms of being the customer of choice, in terms of lots of platforms are being built with different organizations so they can work with their suppliers, so they can help their suppliers on a program of constant improvement. And that is really powerful for the organization, because corporations are being measured on all sorts of elements, and that goes down the chain. So the closer those relationships that can be built with those suppliers, and engage and develop those programs out which ensure that your suppliers are doing the right thing in sustainability and human rights, modern slavery, business ethics, is a really powerful place to be. And there's definitely a massive growth in that. We've seen a huge change in some of the consulting work we've done over the last 12 months, where there's a definite growth in thinking around what do we do down the chain, because that's where we've got to focus if we really want to try and drive different behaviours. Net zero, for example, has to be done scope 3 with your suppliers. So I think thinking differently, and I think about it a lot with the teams that I meet that are just really successful in the procurement space, and a pleasure to work with. And it is about being a relationship builder internally, like we talked about, making sure you're connected with all the right people internally to get the right things to happen and bring people together and collaborate, but also, as I say, with the supply chain as well. I think it's a really exciting space, to be honest with you, right now. I think there's so many challenges. I mean, we all know about contingency planning, which has now gone to a completely different level. So I don't know, what next? So, I think there's so many elements, but for me, the power of really taking a part in that constant improvement beyond audit approach with supply chain, I think is quite an interesting space, and one that needs to be engaged within every organisation.
Thank you. It is a real exciting time to be. So as Maryanne said, the future is here and it's now, and you can see all the shift as well, which is fantastic. I just want to shift our thoughts a little and talk a little about leading authentically and being true to yourself, and that really does take courage. So the final part of our discussion before we get to the amazing Q&A box, which is filling up, and so I want to make sure that we've got time to answer all your lovely questions. But I really want to unpack courage, and particularly courage in the face of adversity. We all need courage to take risks. We need courage to forge new pathways. We need courage to have difficult conversations, and we need to be vulnerable, and we also need to admit that we've got it wrong. And we need to make decisions that are often not popular. So I'm sure you've all demonstrated courage throughout your career, and not to mention the last 18 months during the pandemic. So look, Billie, we might just start with you and ask the question, what has COVID taught you about the future of procurement and supply? But what has COVID taught you in this time, regardless of procurement and supply?
Well, it gave me a taste of retirement and what living with my husband might be like 24/7. So I was joking with friends saying it's also giving us a view of what, people without plastic surgery might look like when they can't get their fillers and everything. But apart from that, it genuinely taught me how we can do things remotely. I think it taught the world that, and I love Sarah's role because I came from consulting and implemented iValuer at a client site, all remotely. Not one person, apart from the client, was on site. So, never would we have thought that was possible 2 years ago if someone said we're going to implement an e-procurement system, but no one's going to be physically in country to do it. So that's sort of some things that, I just marvel at with regards to technology and how far we've come. I think it's also shown us about human vulnerability, and I think we as humans have connected in ways that, we don't have the water cooler conversations reliably anymore. And I know we've got a global audience, so everybody's different, but I know where you are, Sharon, the most locked down city in the world from a COVID perspective, you know, you guys are well and truly over this. And so how do you continue to keep those connections alive? And so we've been quite, I think we've been more attentive to people's mental health with COVID, and appreciating, you know, the isolation that working from home, working remotely, has given, especially people who are living on their own in particular. The courage that I think I've had in all of this is just being truly vulnerable myself when I've had, you know, I work in a global role. COVID and the remoteness has meant that people just invite you to all of these meetings because now you no longer need to be in country, in city, in room. So heck, let's invite, you know, everyone to the party. Whereas beforehand it would have been, oh, well, we're having an in-room meeting. We won't be able to invite the people in Perth because this is a Brisbane meeting. Whereas now we're like, oh yeah, Perth, jump on. We know it's 10 o'clock at night, and then those people feeling obliged because they have fear of missing out. So for me, it's having the courage to say, I actually don't need to be invited to all of these things, and letting my team also know that they have to prioritize, because otherwise they would be online, you know, 20 hours a day, because the people who are inviting them to participate in all these meetings aren't aware of the other demands that are on the team. So I think for me, it's being vulnerable around my own how I'm coping from a day-to-day perspective around COVID. And I'm not locked down as some are, but I have a team in Montreal who haven't been back to the office in 2 years, haven't seen each other in that amount of time either, face to face. So I deal with, and I've just had a team member last week come out of having COVID, so she's recovering. But, you know, so it is very real, and just being on a Friday, having a call, not talking about work, talking about all sorts of things that are going on with you, to try and build a network and a connection that's more than just office talk and the job. So, you know, it's not big. I didn't, you know, save anybody's life, but I certainly have made some decisions in how open I will be with my team to hopefully bring a more human connection to this virtual world that we find ourselves operating in at the moment.
Thank you. You raised a really important part around that courage and that vulnerability. So I'm going to shift the question a little bit and direct it to you, Sara. And just briefly, what was your boldest and most courageous leadership or personal move? And, you know, it may speak to that vulnerability piece or not, but just curious to really unpack that.
Actually, the boldest move that I've done probably in my career was actually shifting from procurement into sales. So that was, to me, that was a bit of a very strong shift, because just a bit of a background, I started earlier on as a graduate engineer in a sales role, and my dislike to that role drove me to procurement, actually. So because I saw it that these are the people who do the cool things and, you know, have these Excel sheets and they plan their procurement plans and so on, and I wanted to be part of that. 10 years from that point onwards, I came back again into sales, but it was my choice, because it was a bold move, but it was my choice, because then at that point I felt that I had a knowledge and a product and a technology space that I wanted to benefit procurement people from. So how can I benefit them from that? Then by joining the, you know, technology providers and flipping the side of the coin. So as I said earlier, now I'm a supplier in many aspects where people interact with me. They interact with me with a provider supplier space. So I think the boldest move was flipping the side of the coin and doing well in that, and excelling and growing in it, and opening that space of, you know, technology in general, SaaS and cloud and all of that people from the tech industry know and talk about. And this now opened the doors for me more. So yes, so I think the boldest move was actually going from this side of the table to the other side.
Beautifully, beautiful. Thank you. We've got so many great questions. I'm going to kick it off because we've just got to get into it, I think. If we could just look first at, there's a question that's come up on chat. It's amazing to see these great women doing well in the procurement field. So kudos to you guys. What advice can you give us, men in senior positions, to encourage junior staff, especially women, to strive for success?
Make it inclusive. I think you know, there are so many fantastic men who are really supporting organisations and women, and there's not enough shout out for that, I don't think. So I think just making sure the environment is inclusive, making sure that you think about how roles are communicated to ensure that they feel inclusive for everybody. Set up mentor schemes, you know, set up schemes within the organisations to ensure people are supported and there's someone there that can mentor and take them through the journey. Or as a male colleague, you be the mentor. You know, there's so many things that you can do, but I think making sure it's an inclusive organisation and that people think inclusively, and there are opportunities for people to support people up that ladder, you know, and making sure the doors are opened for everybody, I think would be my thought.
Want to jump in on that, Jill, because we want to shout out to a couple of the guys who first supported me in procurement. And my first manager is a chap called Kevin McCashin, and first chief procurement officer, a chap called Mark Richards, and they opened those doors for me. They pushed me in ways that I did not think was possible at the time. You know, I don't know anything about this, so here's a course for you to go on. Here's CIPS membership, working with our Ministry of Business Innovation and Employment. Let's push you into doing that. Here's a job opportunity. Why don't you try it? And so I think that is something, if you've got a position of privilege, and that's men and women, if you're in those senior leaders, is open those doors and push people, because people don't necessarily put themselves forward for things. They go, oh, that's not me, that's somebody else. So it's being able to say, yes, this is you, give it a go.
I think also, Jo, just to add to that, be aware of your unconscious bias. We all have it. So just be aware of it and proactively work to overcome it, and give them female mentors as well. I think, you know, they can be male mentors, but I think finding a female mentor in procurement is also another really good way to encourage and support junior female talent.
Thank you. We're going to do speed Q&A right now, and this question is directed to you, Jo. My question to Jo from Alar: what sources of knowledge are you exposed to every day? I think I share the same passion for learning new stuff every day. What are your top 2 sources of knowledge, Jo?
Oh, I have sign-ups to Harvard Business Review emails. So I get those daily. I'm going to say 3 because I don't follow the rules. There's an awesome leader called Alicia Mackay, who's based here in New Zealand, and she does thought leadership. She's just got a really cool style. She does a Wednesday Wisdom every week, and it's just on topics that they're not procurement, but they excite and they spark ideas. And the other guy is a chap called Digby Scott. So he is Australian but lives in New Zealand. He and Alicia teamed up to do a podcast called What's on Your Mind, and those are just my sparking ideas on a daily, weekly basis. So that's where I go to for inspiration.
Writing it down, what's on your mind. I'm going to direct the next one to Jill. Just want to ask from Anissa, what were your main barriers and challenges as a woman procurement professional, and how you overcome it at a specifically higher level? Just maybe 2 points.
Just believe in yourself. You've got to believe in yourself. I'd say that's the most important thing. Know your stuff. Do your homework. So when you're there in front of those people, or whatever the challenge is, you know you've done the right research and you've got those answers, because that builds respect and trust, and believe in yourself. I think those 2 things are really, really key. And look the part. I think when you dress the way that makes you feel powerful, it helps you in some of those sessions and some of those meetings. Again, someone talked about suits earlier, but I think it's really find your space that you feel comfortable and strong in.
And not just in the red for Liverpool, right? Margot asks, can you please tell us about a procurement experience when you've had to be really brave and courageous? What helped you to stand strong? Maybe just one person could answer this. Sara, go for it.
Actually, I remember that was from my early times in my career in procurement, where I was actually working with a food manufacturer, and we had the competition who had a complete production line went out, and there was a decision of actually us ramping up a new production line to cover that space in the market. So my boldest decision was actually, and that was supported by the CEO at that time, we did a calculation on the loss of production and the market sales that we will lose if we don't have the production line on time. So we shipped the whole production line by air, actually, and it was a huge operation of 6 chartered flights came into Sudan with a huge flour mill to be installed ahead of schedule, and then, you know, cover the market gap that was starting to happen because of the loss of the competitors' production line. So it was a big decision, it was bold, and I was responsible of making all the calculations and all the assumptions and the ROIs and the actual gap between the supply and the demand in the market. And yeah, and it was a big move, you know, and yes, I did it, and it was very early in my career. It was about 5 or 6 years into procurement by that time, but I got a listening ear from the CEO at that particular incident.
Thank you. Prashant says, maybe this is not a question, it's more a statement. It's usually taught and said that procurement needs to work hard to get a seat at the table. While procurement has been doing that and things have improved in the last 2 years or so, but why this is just a push relationship. As a value contributor, we should be seeing as a pull as well, where procurement professionals are sought by leaders to take the seat at the table. Thank you. Next question. We often have very heavy, noisy resumes. This one's about resumes. How can we streamline it enough to make it brief, but focused enough to draw the right attention for senior roles in procurement, especially over the years roles, titles have changed, that your resume might not have the correct wording phrases to get the attention of one recruiter? Any suggestions or company that can help you in drafting a supply chain procurement resume? That's a great question. Thank you, Alison.
I think any good recruiter should be able to help you, but I also got some advice years ago around keeping your CV relevant for the job. So if someone's looking for a procurement director and you've been head of procurement or, you know, other similar CPO, just change the titles. It doesn't really matter as long as the role that you did is similar to the leadership position that you're actually applying for. And these days with, you know, algorithms, that's what they pick up and that's what gets you shortlisted. And then if you were to sit down with Sharon and say to Sharon, here's top 5 things that I've done in my career, that's what should be in the exec summary of your CV. And then people, you know, they really snapshot anything else that's after that. If you're not grabbing the attention, and be very results focused as well. So if you led a large, I don't know, sourcing strategy to outsource X, what was it worth and what did you save and what is the percentage of, you know, like, so put some numbers in there that resonate with the reader so that they get an order of magnitude about the size of the project. If you've led a team, how many people were direct report or indirect report? So put some numbers in there that cut through the noise and really nail what you've done, the outcome of the achievement. And as I said, tweak the titles, because as long as it's a leadership position and you're not misrepresenting the truth, unfortunately, you'll miss out if the algorithms are looking for a procurement director and you've been a CPO in your last 3 roles, or procurement manager and you've been a, you know, associate director or something. So just make sure your levels are right and then tweak your titles. But work with a recruiter. A recruiter will be able to help you.
Good advice. Anonymous attendee, do you have to be certified, or what's the best qualifications that are recognised in order for you to get a senior procurement role? Well, of course, I'm going to say MCIPS, but by seeing the panel in front of us who have now moved from MCIPS and are now fellows, look at their distinguished careers and see what their qualifications have brought for them. But definitely speak to us about where we can help you and what level of qualifications will be helpful to your career. How do you keep building your career when you don't want to work full-time again yet due to caring responsibilities? Anyone want to grab that one? Wants to keep building a career, don't want to work full-time. So there's that flexibility. You know, how do you keep your self in the game, I suppose, when you're only working part-time? Can it be done? I think, Billie, you've probably described a situation where, you know, having that flexible work environment has really proved that we can still be relevant and still be at the table.
Yeah, and I think actually with the experience of the globe and the world around COVID, the last 2 years is actually now enabling these you know, initiatives and these plans from individuals around the world where they can be more flexible in how they approach their work, and now the infrastructure, the organizations, governments, and everyone is realizing and recognizing that and putting it in place. So I believe this is now the good time and era if you want to have that, but always keep relevant even with doing your part-time, or even if you are off job or not working at a particular time, keep relevant by, you know, boosting your academic side, your qualification side, by studying, by making sure that you have the right gap fillers. If you have some time off, it's okay, but at least, you know, continue being relevant, continue learning, continue investing time in developing yourself in those gap times and gap years, and it will always keep you in the game in your profession.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I would add there is if you can just also remain very active within your association, both professionally in CIPS and also in the industry. So attend meetings, attend seminars, lend your voice to the conversations that are going on, because that way you remain visible, because you manage your visibility.
Yeah, beautifully said. Alan asks, many of us say culture eats strategy for breakfast. What cultural attributes does a great procurement leader need to consider when taking on a transformation role? If we could just have one person answer this very briefly. Anyone? Gill, do you want to tackle this one?
I can't remember the question.
That's right.
So it's a cultural.
Cultural. What's a great cultural attributes of a procurement leader in general?
Just I think again, engaging. You know, being engaging, being inclusive, bringing people in, listening to everyone within the team, making sure everyone has a voice. I think for me that's important.
Fantastic. Look, there's still some great questions. I think we'll keep moving through. I recognised some questions around fantastic panel, Gill's explanation of I shop for a living, some great comments there, some recommendations to talk to CIPS about help creating a culture of mentorships and getting support from CIPS. All really great questions, and we will try and answer them after this session. Thank you for everybody for your involvement. I want to just finish with all of our panelists today, and I want to ask a question of everybody. And that question is, now that you've travelled the journey of time, what advice would you give to your younger self? And Gill, I will start with you.
You know, I was not very confident at all. And people have helped me with that. So just do things to be strong, to build your confidence, to have your belief. That's a lot to do with your skill set and a lot to do with constant learning and developing yourself. But go for it. You know, really go for it. Don't let yourself be held back by you, I think would be my key thing. And find a mentor, find people out there to support you, build a network, you know, around you that is your resilience, your support network, and your driver. And these sorts of women here are just fabulous to do that with. So,
thank you, Sara.
I think Jill said it all, and exactly what I wanted to say is if I would, be able to advise my younger self at this point, I would say, yes, be more confident, lean in more, and also believe in my capacity and capability to do more at the time. At an earlier age, and when you are still fresh into things, you'd always have that hesitancy, that guardness in, am I doing it right or wrong? As long as you're doing your homework right, you're doing your research, you're investing the time, believe in your capability for change and lean in and move forward. And yes, and I'm glad that I went into CIPS earlier in my career, because that helped me define more, my passion and put a context around it. And then developing this lovely network of CIPS, either regionally, started in Sudan, then Middle East, and now global. So yeah, so I'm happy that my younger self made that decision at a good point of my life. Thank you.
Good decision. Jo, what are you going to say to the young Jo?
Well, I think what I'd be going is, when things go wrong, it's not the end of the world. And that speaks back to that self-confidence thing, that, a procurement would go wrong and I would be in pieces. I now use those lessons. I have to capitalize the procurement that went wrong, that ended up with complaints to the minister. The world didn't end. I've learnt a lot, and I share the stories with other people so that they don't make the same mistakes. And the other advice I give to myself is, take the opportunities, every single one that comes your way, because they open doors, you learn, you grow. And by putting your hand up and saying, yeah, I can do that, even when you're not feeling confident, you step into the role and suddenly you realize you can do that. And then you've got another door opened. So that's what I'd say to my younger self.
Thank you. And Maryanne, what about little Maryanne?
I think I would have said yes sooner. Yes to the opportunity to lead. Yes to volunteership. Yes to so many other things that people saw in me in terms of my capabilities, but I kept second guessing myself. I mean, I say to myself now, I have been CIPS Kenya branch chair for 3 years, and it's exposed me phenomenally. I mean, and I asked them, why didn't I do this earlier? So that's a question I'd ask to everybody else. I mean, just say yes. Yes to the opportunity to sit in boards. Yes to the opportunity to volunteer. Yes to mentor somebody else. You're doing a good job anyway, and you also learn and grow in the process.
Thank you. And little Billie, what's she going to hear?
Yeah, look, I think on a serious note, and I loved some of the comments and absolutely agree with that. Just say yes. I love that as a response. I think embracing my differences throughout my career would have been a bit of advice that I would have, because I often thought that I needed to shut up, be quiet, tone it down, when actually I might have been the bright, not the intelligent, but the spark in the room. Definitely address the imposter syndrome, because I've had it my whole career. And also, on a very serious note, I think find my voice for justice, because I've observed in the last, 25 plus years, things that today I wouldn't stand for. So I wish I had have known more back then about what I know now, because that's what I would be telling my younger self, is I could have been a force for good difference back then, instead of, observing and staying quiet about some things. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not going to use my words to close out today's session. I'm going to turn to Elaine Mclean, who's put a comment on the chat, and she says, thank you for a fabulous event. Well done to all the panelists for being so open and honest. A great start to my day. So thank you, Ellen. And she also says thanks for organising. So thanks also to Sophia, who makes this happen. It was a great session today. Thank you so much from our panellists from all over the world. There's not a lot of opportunities you get to say that. So thank you for your generous giving and your wisdom. Before we all disappear, I just want to tell you about our next webinar, and also I want to get you to fill out the survey from today's session so we can make the next one even better. Our next webinar is Intelligent Source to Pay, AI in Procurement, and this will be happening on Thursday the 7th of October, 2 days away. So join CIPS and Medius when AI expert Chris Smith We'll cover the latest thinking in AI development, where AI can be applied to really assist procurement and finance on cost reduction, as well as how to eliminate process fiction and transforming outcomes through enhanced AI. We'll also hear from Ben Ludick, MCIPS Water Corporation, as he shares a case study on automation and RPA. So that's Intelligent Source to Pay, AI in procurement, on Thursday, the 7th of October. It's 12 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time, other times around the world. So please join us and register by visiting the events page on our website at cips.org or our CIPS Australia and New Zealand LinkedIn page. And to all attendees, we really hope you found this website insightful. But before you leave today, please take a few minutes to fill out our post-event webinar survey, and a copy of the webinar and a list of all the unanswered questions will be emailed to you by the end of the week. So please fill out the survey, stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.